I'm happy to have you with us, so welcome. Before I introduce, turn it over to Brian Berendts, our presenter tonight. And I want to again say thank you, Bob, for all you do, and Dr. Jim Chin for all you do as well. We couldn't do this without you, and we're so happy to be a good team for this stuff, this education.
Thank you.
Work. And I'll give you a little overview. Some of you may know a little bit about the Lindner Center, and some of you may not. We're not far here in the neighborhood of Mason. We're 18 years old this year. We're a nonprofit. We're in the middle of an expansion, so we're going to be adding 8 beds to our residential. We're adding a 4-story medical office building, and we just have completed a new parking lot, and we're working on the landscape around that, which is beautiful. A new bridge that you walk through after you park in that parking lot that is just wonderful. And the treatment we do, we're comprehensive. We have a continuum of care from inpatient for acute care, harm to self, harm to others, to a partial hospitalization, to intensive outpatient for addiction and co-occurring, to a full outpatient practice with psychiatrists, psychologists, nurse practitioners. We also do neuromodulation, which is for treatment-resistant depression, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, as well as ketamine we do internally. We have a full continuum for eating disorders, inpatient, partial hospitalization, IOP, and a full Harold C. Schott outpatient team for eating disorders. We work with adolescents from outpatient treatment to partial hospitalization, as well as we work with TMS with adolescents. We have a residential side of the house where folks are coming sometimes out of the country for our comprehensive diagnostic assessment, where we're really good at surrounding an individual with a team and teasing out what is going on through psychiatry, through psychologists, through social work, and any there's other types of consults that might be needed. We're really good at figuring out and diagnosing what is going on and creating that blueprint and starting some of that short-term skills building before we're looking out into our network of hope for where this individual may need to go next. We have something called rapid access. That's where folks can call 2 afternoons, can come in 2 afternoons a week. They make an appointment. It's for someone that may need an assessment, that could need medication. And so it's that rapid access to meeting with a nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist and a social worker and getting that workup for 90 minutes. And we have that available 2 afternoons a week. That's kind of a quick overview. So you can hear we do a lot. If I can help, don't hesitate to let me know, or I'll give you my card. And just a reminder of what is coming next for our community education presentation. This will be back up in September. So there's a schedule that's on the table if you want to take one. We'll be back up September 16th with bipolar basics, breaking down the stigma of a common and treatable disorder, Dr. John M. Hawkins. So keep that in mind. Join us if you can. And tonight we're really excited to have Brian Berendts here to talk about Beyond the Prescription, Lifestyle Foundations of Mental Wellness. And Brian is a nurse practitioner at the Lindner Center. And help me welcome Brian Berendts.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Set a little timer for myself here so I don't overextend. I really want to thank everybody for coming out on a rainy night, and for anybody that's online for joining us. It's a very exciting time to be at the Lindner Center. I've been there since 2022, and prior to that, I worked at Children's Hospital here in Cincinnati for a couple of years. At the Lindner Center, I worked primarily in outpatient in the partial hospitalization program, but I spent 1.5 years in the residential program. And I also work about 4 or 5 weekends and then fill in for people when they're on vacation in the inpatient unit. So I try to make myself available in multiple areas of the hospital because it's helpful to keep my clinical skills up in all those areas. It helps me with my outpatients, to be honest with you, in the most helpful way. So this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Just a couple of housekeeping things. I have no disclosures, and obviously the slides are available. They're available online as well. This is my background, most of which I've kind of talked about. I do have some additional certification and online training, to be honest with you, in nutritional psychiatry from Massachusetts General. And this is what we're going to be talking about today, which you've probably already looked at, so I'm not going to read those. So the way I like to start out with this is sort of a bit of a metaphor when I talk about lifestyle medicine. Is conventional medicine and insurance companies these days in America would have you believe that if you walked into a bathroom and there was water all over the floor in the bathroom, that our medical system as it is set up right now would tell you to go grab as many towels as possible and start mopping up the floor. And while you're mopping up the floor and spending all kinds of time and energy and effort mopping up the floor, you're forgetting the most important thing, that the faucet is still running and is still overflowing, and you're constantly playing catch up. Lifestyle medicine, integrative medicine, functional medicine, those areas particularly, the goal is to not replace conventional medicine as an add-on that focuses on some very specific things to complement what is going on in conventional medicine. It is not a replacement. So what are we talking about when we talk about the pillars of lifestyle medicine as it relates to all the different areas of medicine, but to mental health and wellness in particular? Sleep, physical activity, nutrition, positive connections, harmful substance reduction, and stress management. That is the textbook response, pulled directly from a textbook. If you read Zeke Emanuel's recent book that came out in February, he's one of the guys that was under the Obama administration. His brother was the mayor of Chicago for a while. He wrote a book called Eat Your Ice Cream, and he reworded this in a slightly different way. Sleep like a baby, move it, eat your ice cream, which is a bit of a play on words, but he was talking about nutrition when he was doing that. Talk to people. Harmful and substance reduction, he entitled an entire chapter called Don't Be a Schmuck. And expand your mind. That's his take on the same principles. So why? Why do we need to talk about lifestyle factors? Sleep especially, but also physical activity, poor diet, these are significant and frequently ignored or under-addressed contributors to treatment non-response in depression and anxiety patients. And systematically addressing these individually over the course of a series of visits and can make a meaningful impact into someone's mental health. And I will talk about that a little bit more as we go along. Along with non-adherence to treatment, plus frequently unexplored areas like caffeine overuse, alcohol use, and marijuana use, these are contributors. I mean, how many of us, at least the folks that are in the room, how many of us have gone to our doctor for a 20-minute yearly physical and they say, well, you need to exercise and sleep better and maybe drink a little less and, get out of that. They'll give you like some basic things, but there's never any discussion about what that actually means. What does it mean to exercise more? Some people just their eyes kind of glaze over when they get that. And I try to go through it with patients and like, what does that actually mean? Your brain is not an isolated organ. It is not sitting on your shoulders, acting all alone without any input from the rest of your body, and your body is not acting without your brain. There are multiple pathways that are going back and forth and back and forth. Your brain is communicating with your body, and your body is communicating with your brain. And I kind of already mentioned that about we're trying to strengthen what we're doing in conventional medicine, not replace it. A generic example. So this is typically what we see at the Lindner Center, sadly, is by the time someone has gone to their family practice provider for a couple of years, or have been going to just get therapy for a couple of years before they come to us. That's kind of the ideal situation, but usually they're coming from their family practice provider and they have been on one or two medicines. They've been struggling for a long period of time, and it just keeps building and building and building. By the time they get to us, they're in a situation with pervasive depression, crushing anxiety, debilitating panic attacks that happen once a day, if not twice a day, or a couple of times a week. They've tried and failed multiple medications. They've been to all kinds of psychiatrists, all kinds of therapists, and they will repeatedly say that they are hopeless and nothing works. And there's an opportunity, I see that as an opportunity to say, okay, well, what is being missed? Because that's generally what we kind of find when we dig into stuff, because the questions that are on here are things that are coming right off of my template that I use when I talk to patients. We start to get into sleep and they're going to bed really late at night. They're on their phone to distract. They're sleeping in on the weekends till noon. They're not moving. They're too tired or they're too sore. Their appetite is very minimal a lot of times, or they're just eating fast food, or they're barely eating and not understanding why they're gaining weight. Their social connectivity has gone out the window completely. They have no social connection. The cannabis in that line is actually an accident, it's a typo, but the social media and internet use has gone through the roof. They're drinking caffeine all day long just to stay awake and function. They might only be drinking alcohol on the weekends, but it helps them fall asleep. They feel terrible the next day. Tobacco and vaping is more of a problem than flat out tobacco use is, but it might only be on the weekends. Marijuana use might just be a couple times a week. They use it to lower their anxiety to get to sleep. It's potent, it's powerful, it does do that. It can lower their pain. They might not be doing any other illicit substances. They have no spiritual connection or mindfulness. They can't sit still quietly. They struggle to sit still and be quiet for just 5 minutes a day. They have interests. They don't do them anymore. They've lost their hobbies completely. They're burnout, overworked. They're working more hours and feeling like they're producing less. And they're having financial debt and difficulties. We've all probably done retail therapy. I love buying shoes. I'll be the first one to admit it. But door dashing McDonald's costs $23. These folks that are coming in have a lot of financial strain because of their anxiety and depression, in addition to the normal things that are occurring in society today where things are very expensive. This is pretty typical. Even if you have of these things that have been listed on the last two slides, even if you're doing 3 of those, people are going to be struggling. And I'll be honest with you, sleep is usually the first one that I jump on with a patient, because that's the one that I have a background in sleep medicine. So that's the one that's easiest, and you can get some pretty quick responses or pretty quick outcomes with sleep, especially. And it's interesting, I do have one of my former students here today who just graduated. So he will tell you that I jump on sleep pretty quickly. So sleep medicine, or sleep in and of itself, sleep profoundly will impact your mental health, because we're talking about 2 things. We're not just talking about sufficient amounts of sleep. We all need to get an extra hour of sleep. It's the quality or the efficiency of your sleep and the consistency that you do it, which is very, very important. The evidence is solid. This is one of the most this and movement are 2 of the most researched areas. Poor quality sleep will independently increase your risk of depression, anxiety. Your trauma response will be, you'll be less inclined to respond to trauma, and it increases your risk of other psychiatric disorders. And it's a bidirectional relationship. There are mental health issues that we'll cover a little bit later where that will cause you to have more sleep issues. But the predominant direction of this relationship is poor sleep leads to mental health issues. And there's a lot of evidence that treating the sleep problems produces meaningful improvements in psychiatric symptoms. Sleep affects you emotionally and cognitively, attention span, memory issues, emotional regulation, stress tolerance. And this can happen with one night. All it takes is one night. And anybody that has crossed a couple of time zones, or even if you're talking about the daylight savings in the spring, that 1 hour less of night of sleep, the rates of accidents go up on Monday morning after anybody that's been a police officer. The rate of accidents on Mondays after daylight savings, people are getting 1 less hour of sleep. We drive terribly. It's a good day to take off. So why, this is a busy slide, and I apologize. Some of these is just, you just have to cram a lot of stuff on there. So why does sleep impact us this way? Well, the fear center and the thinking decision part of your brain are terribly impacted by on the cellular level when we don't get enough sleep. And these areas of the brain, particularly the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, will impacting those areas and causing inflammation, particularly in these areas, will lead to increased anxiety, stress, mood swings, racing thoughts, and the inability to calm down. They have done some really amazing studies where they show people pictures, and that's what this next part about sleep changing your emotional perception. They will take someone and deprive them of sleep, and then show them photos of different events. And what they found out is that you could be at a birthday party with giggling babies, puppies, rainbows, and unicorns. And if you are sleep deprived, you will sit there and go, I don't care. This stinks. And it's all because you're not sleeping enough. The other thing that will happen is if you are in a neutral situation, the dog needs fed. You can't find your keys. That will inevitably become a negative situation for you. And your stressful experiences will feel more intense. All right. The other thing that happens when you lose a lot of sleep is that you will hyper focus on negative information. In a sleep deprived state, we will scan our environment for everything that is negative. And once we find that thing, because we're predisposed to look for it in that state, we will latch onto it, ruminate about it, and not let it go. Losing sleep is tragic for your anxiety and your depression. If someone is struggling with ADHD, there's actually a study that just came out recently looking at the impact of your reward system with inefficient and inadequate sleep, and they found that it actually impacted the amount of medicine that people needed to be on, if I'm recalling it correctly. So it was a really interesting study about sleep and the impact on ADHD. Short sleep duration has been associated with increase of ADHD symptoms. People that don't sleep are more inattentive. They have more oppositional behaviors. Their cognitive tempo slows down, and their reward system becomes dysregulated. And this is an interesting fact about the sleep part of this, is because ADHD folks with the algorithms that are in social media, they're actually the perfect client for these algorithms with social media, because they will latch onto it. They don't get off it. They stay up till 1 a.m, and then that precipitates worsening of their ADHD the next day. It's a major problem, and it's difficult to get kids with ADHD or even adults with ADHD off of their devices at night and getting them to go to bed, because it's wildly important. Sleep also affects you systemically. It increases a bunch of inflammatory cytokines, which are basically the signaling system in a very specific part of your brain. That part of your brain signals on a cellular level, then signals to other parts of your brain that there's an issue and stress that needs to be dealt with an inflammatory process. And then that causes a cascade of events that signals to the entire rest of your body that there is an event that is occurring that requires you to have an inflammatory response. But then the flip side occurs on the systemic level. Your organs and your tissues then signal back to the same exact part of your brain saying, something's wrong. Please initiate more inflammatory cycle. Well, what does all that inflammatory cycle lead to? Increased pain, GI issue, or gastrointestinal issues. There's some links that it leads to increased risk of heart attack, and on and on and on. We'll cover some of those a little bit more later, but this is a bidirectional communication system that is occurring where your brain is telling your body, which is telling your brain, which is telling your body that there is an inflammatory issue, all because you did not sleep. There's actually could be no threat at all. The threat is that you didn't get enough sleep the night before. It also, one thing I do want to mention, I'm glad I put this at the bottom, it interferes with serotonin and dopamine regulation. And when someone comes to me and they're not sleeping well, and I know that that's what's going on, I'm giving them medicine to try and regulate and alter their serotonin and dopamine, but not getting enough sleep gets in the way of that. I'm asking the medicine in that situation to carry a very large rock up a very steep hill at that point. So sleep is important even in medication management and the success that you may or may not have with that. Chronic sleep will also create something that's called an allostatic overload. Essentially, your stress system remains activated too long, and you end up with a lot of cortisol and a lot of adrenaline in your system constantly. And you end up with a lot of anxiety, you feel burnout, your sleep problems get worse. This is an example of it leading back to more sleep problems. And your concentration becomes more difficult and worsens. When a patient comes in and says, well, my doctor asked me to get a cortisol test done, and I'm like, it's not necessary. Are you anxious? Yes, it's probably going to be high. It's almost a non-necessary test at that point. I don't think I've ever run it, to be honest, because if a patient tells me they're anxious, their cortisol level is likely to be high. Chronic stress also alters the structures of our brain and impairs neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is something that's very important. It's the way our brain learns and adapts and creates new pathways and adjusts as we go through our lifespan. We used to think that this only happened in childhood and through adolescence. We now know that it happens across the lifespan. And if you are chronically stressed from insufficient sleep, that whole entire process will shut down, which is problematic. Let me move on. So realistically, what do I tell my patients? Get an extra hour of sleep, go to bed. Teenagers and emerging adults sadly need closer to 9 or 10 hours of sleep. And I will tell you, any parent that has ever tried to have a conversation with a teenager that needs to get up at 6:30 in the morning to get on a 7 a.m. bus, it's even laughable when it comes out of my mouth in a meeting, that they need to go to bed or be oriented towards bedtime at 8:30 at night. But if someone is really struggling with their mental health, that is a way of paying it forward to themselves. But it is very difficult for a number of reasons, but they need a lot more sleep until, for girls, it's like around 24, 25. And for boys, it's closer to 28, 29, or 30 that we start to get into what our adult sleep need is, which for everybody is a little bit different, but it's generally around 7 or 8 hours. Usually what I'll ask somebody is like, what happens when you go on vacation and you're away from clocks and work and things like that? And they'll say, I usually sleep for 8 hours. Man, that's probably what you need. So getting 6 or 7 during the week is somewhat problematic in that scenario, at least. Minimize and eliminate screen time within 2 hours of desired sleep onset time. In the old days before the internet, sadly, I remember those days. At the sleep clinic, we used to tell people that the bedroom was for sleeping and adult activities. Well, now the internet has invaded the bedroom, and I now have to tell people, please get off your electronics in the bedroom. It's not helping you get to sleep and stay asleep. It winds you up. The light on your screen, the blue light thing is kind of bunk. It's not really helpful. The light on the screen is going through the part of your brain that says it's daytime. So we kind of need to get off our screens, get the TV out of the bedroom at night. Get some exercise, and I'll kind of get into this a little bit, but essentially when you move during the day, it raises your core body temperature during the daytime, which enables then your core body temperature to drop even lower at night when you're sleeping. That's wildly important because what it does is it enables you to get into a more efficient state of REM sleep and slow wave sleep. And that's where you do all your fear processing, which helps you then process your anxieties and fears from the day before. So it's very important to get a little bit of movement to impact your sleep in that manner. Avoid sleeping in, and this is usually where I start with folks, because people will sleep deprive themselves all week long, and then they get to the weekend and they sleep in until noon. That's actually really problematic because you're essentially flying to Hawaii, at least in the Eastern time zone. You're essentially flying to Hawaii on the weekend and then trying to come back to Cincinnati on a red eye on Sunday night. And it takes an hour or a day for every hour that you sleep in on the weekend. So if you sleep in until 11 o'clock and you normally have to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's going to take you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to recover from that. And if you've ever had jet lag, it feels like you have the flu, you're tired, you can't think, you can't remember anything that happened. You feel miserable. So I encourage patients to keep the same wake up time 7 days a week. And if they need an extra hour of sleep, go to bed an hour earlier, or get up at the same time and take a nap. All right. If you want to go out and live your life, there's more benefit to socialization than there is to a lot of other things. So if you're 20 years old and you want to get up, stay out until 2 a.m, have at it. Live your life. Be joyous. Get up at the same time in the morning and take a nap in the afternoon. It's much more important to maintain that. All right. Moving on to movement. So let me check the time here. Okay. So moving on to movement. This is another area that has been greatly researched, probably the most researched area of lifestyle medicine. Physical inactivity can negatively affect your mental health. It's been shown to increase your risk of depression, anxiety, and memory and concentration problems. And the flip side of this, as they've researched, this is also important. Sedentary behavior is harmful. And it's actually, sometimes it's what you're doing, which is more important. Sedentary, non-mental activities like watching TV or being on the internet, just doom scrolling, is much more problematic than reading a book or doing a puzzle or actually playing a game, something that requires some mental effort. It is the passive sedentary behavior that is very harmful. And it doesn't take much. The recommendations are 2.5 hours of brisk walking. That's what the research has shown, is that only 2.5 hours, it's 20 minutes a day, can lower your risk of depression by 25%. It seems like a lot. And I'll be honest, I told a patient just yesterday, they live in a suburb like real similar to what's up here in Mason. I said, I don't know any city engineers. I don't know how far apart the fire hydrants are. They seem like they're 150 feet, maybe. I said, can you walk to the third fire hydrant up your street and back? Let's start small. Can you get can you go 450 feet and then walk back? That's a win for this individual. Start small. It doesn't take much. If you go to Meyer, just parking out at the end of the park, not on a day like today, it's raining here, but if you can park far away from the front door and walk into these big box stores, you've stolen 5 minutes of walking right there. We can, if you're physically able to do this, that is a caveat to this. It doesn't take much effort, honestly, to get 20 minutes of movement in during your day. And I will say this is kind of an important caveat to movement. I have never, ever, and will never, ever tell a patient to get a gym membership. That is absurd recommendation. If you want to do that, go for it. If you want to do a triathlon, go for it. For some people, gardening is exercise. I enjoy my garden. I enjoy cutting the grass. I do triathlons, so do I consider that exercise? No, but that's me. Okay. And it's different for everybody. If you're capable of doing some kind of movement during the day, it is essential. Okay. So please understand that I'm not telling anybody to get a gym membership. That would be malpractice in my opinion. It's a great way to throw money down the drain. Try and replace the sitting time activity with an activity that can improve your mood. Right? Go for a walk take the dog for a walk instead of scrolling TikTok for 5 minutes. The dog will love you for it. Exercise improves brain function, lowers inflammation, improves blood flow to your brain, supports those healthy stress hormones that we talked about a little bit earlier. And physical activity, and I kind of mentioned that already. Exercise also improves the neuroplasticity. So your brain is better. The studies have shown that your brain is better able to learn, adapt, and recover from stress when we move around. And the flip side, studies have also been done. Lack of movement can lead to low motivation, poor focus, and increased depression symptoms. Physical activity supports your emotional health. It builds self-esteem, improves social connection, especially if you're doing something that you do with other people. And it creates a sense of accomplishment. It can reduce a lot of negative thinking. It helps people distract. I had someone that does eye movement therapy tell me that walking through the woods is essentially recreating eye movement therapy because your eyes are darting back and forth the whole time that you're walking as you're looking around your environment. It can improve your mood and regulation based on what the studies have shown. And active people are less likely long-term to develop depression. And regular movement supports long-term mental health across the lifespan. There's been a number of studies showing this. There's many forms of exercise, and it's like I said, it's going to be different for everybody. Some, with somebody with two bad knees or should not be trying to go run a half marathon. Find something that works for you that you can repeat. Moderate exercise is usually the most effective to improve mood and reduce anxiety, and it's easier for people to maintain consistently. Group or supervised exercise gives you that additional socialization with other folks. My sister, I know she does water aerobics. She loves it. And every time I talk to her, when she leaves a water aerobics class, all I can hear is the joy in her voice. Yeah, she enjoys doing it. It provides some peer support encouragement when you're doing that. Yoga and strength training have often high participation rates based on the research that's been done. And many people, if you find something you enjoy, people continue to do it long term, which is super important. So some practical recommendations that I usually tell folks around movement. Some is better than none. Start with small goals. Like I mentioned, walk 3 fire hydrants and then come back. Even 10 minutes or 5 minutes can be super helpful. Reduce sitting during the day. If you have a job where you're sitting down a lot, get up and just walk the length of the hallway if you need to, just to get some movement in the day. Replace passive activities, what we talked about. Choosing some kind of activity that is realistic and enjoyable will help build long-term habits and make gradual progress more sustainable. And movement is also part of behavioral activation therapy. It encourages participation in rewarding activities and helps improve mood, energy, and focus, energy, focus, and sleep, according to the research. Okay, good. So nutrition, this conversation is chock full of landmines. Okay, and there's some caveats to this. Nutrition is not for a nutrition discussion is not for everyone. There are particular patients with eating disorders, patients with specific kinds of OCD, where a conversation that hyper focuses on nutrition can be really problematic. And I have to be very careful about having that conversation, if ever having that conversation with someone. And there's some mental health conditions that need some special attention when we're talking about food. Food alone is not a cure for mental illness. I had a patient that actually backed down on their Prozac once and said, well, I started eating blueberries. And I kind of shook my head and said, that's not the way this works. So let's have a different conversation. Healthy eating. And when I talk, okay, so the other part of this, when I use the word diet, I am not under any circumstances talking about keto, Optivia, cabbage soup, or any other diet that is out there, okay? I am talking about the habitual intake that people do on a day-to-day basis. What is their habitual dietary intake? I am also aware that there are a lot of socioeconomic issues that go into this conversation. Food has gotten very expensive recently, but this is just an issue across the board. Folks with mental health issues long-term, it can be generational. It can, folks struggle to get out of a generational socioeconomic situation that they're in. And there tends to not be a lot of either access to whole foods for a number of different reasons. And I also want to very much mention that when it comes to nutrition, there is usually one person in the household who is managing this. Moms, I am looking at you. Okay. There is one person in the household that deals with what food ends up on the table. I'm aware of that. So this is not everybody. This is a very difficult conversation and has to be done very carefully with patients so that I don't flat out lose them as a patient, because there's a lot of factors at play here. Okay. So with those caveats, out in front. Healthy eating and food habits are supportive in nature. They are impactful, greatly impactful, and we'll go over that a little bit, but they do work best alongside individual therapy, medication, and supportive therapies otherwise. So that brings us to the situation in America. It's called the standard American diet. And some people actually say in the medical community, there is an understanding that the acronym SAD usually stands for Standard American Diseases: obesity, heart disease, diabetes, low energy, depression, and anxiety. They have studied this at length, especially in areas where American companies have moved in with their glorious fast food restaurants in Mexico, the Pacific Islands, and Okinawa especially. And the rates of obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and depression and anxiety have gone through the roof when these companies moved in. Sadly, these are highly processed foods with excessive sugar, unhealthy fats, low intake, almost no intake of fruit, vegetables, and fiber. And you end up with a problem where everyone's physical and mental health, not everyone's, but a large portion of people really start to struggle physically and mentally from this kind of dietary eating pattern. Food affects the brain and the body. Nutrition can influence mood, energy, focus, stress levels. And poor eating habits may worsen your mental health symptoms. Increased fatigue, lower motivation. This is not just the amount of food you're eating in the situation with someone who has an eating disorder, but the quality of the food that you're also taking in. It can affect your emotional regulation. Healthy eating supports your overall physical wellness. With balanced meals, good nutrition are best combined with sleep, adequate sleep, movement, and stress management. When you put these all together, they all start to connect. And that's where you start to see the best outcomes. A large portion of what we talk about when you get really deep into the weeds with nutritional psychiatry is the idea of socialization with meals, either family meals, or just flat out eating in a social situation and not eating alone. A lot of the research, especially at Harvard, since 2010, if I'm not mistaken, is around family meals strengthening relationships and social connection, and actually leading to increased outcomes for children and adolescents with higher test scores and on standardized testing and better outcomes academically. Family meals encourage communication. Family members feel more connected, more supported. There's healthy socialization in a lot of cases, in not all of them. I'm fully aware of that. Shared meals can create a consistency and a routine. This idea of consistency and routine is going to come up a lot through the rest of this talk. Family rituals can build stability. They offer an opportunity for you and your children and your spouse or your partner to just check in with one another. How was your day? Tell me about your wins today. What was something that went really badly today? This is our first, as children, family dinner is our first experience with group therapy. And no one's ever done a study, but I would love to see the study about how well people engage in group therapy as an adult with how many family dinners they had as a child, because I think you learn how to communicate in a group environment around the dinner table. All right. Now, I'm fully aware that there are a lot of family system dynamics which do not support this idea. That's another caveat. But if you have the opportunity to do this, please do. It makes a big difference. Especially with people want to be heard. I mean, we just saw Disclosure Day. The whole point of the movie is to listen. When we sit down for family dinner, listen with curiosity. Listen to what people are saying, and not so much especially as parents or even as partners, we don't need to listen to give advice, and we don't need to listen to respond. We can listen to be curious, and we can listen to learn. And people, when they feel heard like that, they have a better sense of themselves, just feeling like, hey, they listened to what I said. I feel awesome. That increases your connection almost instantly with another person. You can do this with strangers too. You can, I met some people here tonight, just having a conversation makes people feel good about themselves. It can reduce that feeling of isolation, build a better sense of belonging. And I'll kind of get into what my recommendation with this is, but so let me hold off. It lowers stress and emotional well-being. Let me hold off on what my recommendation with families usually is. So practical recommendations. Actually, it was the next slide. Sorry. I usually start out with a really simple question. Does your plate look colorful? Is your plate look like an ode to the color brown? Oh, wait a minute. I went backwards. Okay. Does your plate look like this? This might be problematic. We might need to have a conversation if this is the standard American diet. It's brown. Or does it look like this? Are you trying to find some whole food? Are you trying to find some color in what you're eating every day? It can be something simple. I'm not asking everybody to make a 70-course meal. This is a little bit of overkill. But it shows the colors that you can add to a meal. Is your plate colorful? Try to eat more whole foods. A lot of the food that is in that previous slide, a lot of the stuff in this picture is made in a factory. Is your food made in a factory or does it come from a farm in its natural state? Try to reduce the amount of highly processed sugary foods, but keep in mind that donuts happen. Okay. I get really excited when people are like, well, I skipped the office birthday party because there was cake and I don't want to eat cake. Eat the cake. The socialization part of that is the more important part that you're skipping. So, and I worked as a nurse for 20 years in various offices and units. There was cupcakes there a lot. And it's a place where people gather and they talk and, oh, these donuts, it's a thing. Donuts happen. Don't avoid that life experience that can actually bring a lot of joy. Try to avoid eating alone. So prepare meals with others. If you handed the average 20-year-old today a chicken and said, make dinner, they're going to look at you like you're silly. But you have to, if you prepare meals together, then they start to learn, what spices are. They start to learn, well, you can't make a chicken unless you have something to put it in. Beer can chicken's easy to make. And it's kind of fun, to be honest. But try and make a meal without a microwave. You know why meals kind of came about, like TV dinners? Those of us that are a little younger, do you remember TV dinners from the 60s and 70s?
Yeah.
Yep. It was because Swanson had an excess of turkeys in the one year in the 50s, and they're like, what are we going to do? And they packaged them up, stuck them in trays, and the TVs were kind of a thing. And you could just pull it out of the freezer and stick it in the oven, pull it out of the freezer, stick it in the oven, and sit down in front of your car-sized television, and nobody had to cook. It was great. And then microwaves became a thing in the 70s and 80s, and they put more processing and more preservatives and more really sugary sauces so that things wouldn't dry out into the meals. So try and make a meal without a microwave. Try and make your meals electronics free. This is a big thing. To put your phone in another room or just leave it in the kitchen and go sit in another room. If you have a dining room that never gets used, use it. If you need to just put your phones back in the bedroom and have everybody sit around the kitchen counter, try and do it. Usually what I tell folks, if there's 21, this is an important thing. The evidence says that it's 5 meals a week. When I'm talking about having family meals together, the evidence supports that there's a significant change at 5 meals. I usually tell people to start small. Can you find 3? Out of 21 standard meals in the week, can you find 3 meals to sit down, order DoorDash, and put it on a plate and go sit down and have a family meal? I'm not asking everybody to cook. I'm just asking everybody to sit down and have some social time together. It can make a big difference. Keep in mind what I said earlier, nutrition should be part of a bigger treatment plan. It doesn't solve things. There's no good evidence that there's no good evidence that some of the claims that are being made about certain diets alone can solve mental health issues.
Are you also recommending that we use cookbooks instead of?
No, get on the internet. There's a lot of great ideas on the internet. There's a lot of great ideas about how to use your air fryer on the internet. I love those recipes. So no, I'm not cookbooks. There's plenty of options out there. It's a good question. All right, let me move over to positive connectivity. This is a super important and kind of, and you, if you haven't noticed yet, the sleep connects to the movement connects to the sleep, the socialization and nutrition part connects to the positive connection with others. These things all crisscross back and forth to each other. So positive connectivity has been studied quite robustly that loneliness and isolation can seriously affect your mental health. Being lonely increases your risk of depression, anxiety, stress, and suicidal thoughts. And it's the important part of this is that the feeling of lonely is more important than the number of friends you have. You could have 80 friends, but if you can still feel lonely. I have plenty of moms that will bring in their 16, 15-year-old son and say, well, he only has 2 friends. I'm okay. Don't compare him to his sister who had 20 friends. He has 2 friends. And I turn to little Johnny and I'll say, do you feel lonely? It's like, no, not lonely at all. I have 2 friends. We go see a movie once a week. We play cooperatively online. They're playing a first-person shooter, which, you know, whatever. I'm not going to get excited about that because they have socialization. They're seeing them every day at school. They have someone that they can talk to and spend time with. And the other question I'll follow that up with is, if someone calls little Johnny and says, hey, do you want to go see a movie? Are they saying no? If they're saying yes, who cares if they have 2 friends? Those might be the 2 friends they have for the rest of their life. They might be their 2 best friends they have forever. I kind of hope that they expand their friendship circle, but for right now, I don't have a problem with that. With only a couple of friends, if they're meaningful relationships. Loneliness is a major mental health risk factor. People who feel lonely are much more likely to develop. The research has shown that people who feel lonely are much more likely to develop depression and anxiety. Loneliness also changes how your brain responds to social situations. If someone is isolating for 3 and 4 and 5 weeks or months, and they suddenly go into a social setting, they are less likely to enjoy it. They're uncomfortable, and they're more inclined to go back to that socially isolating situation. Positive interactions feel less rewarding, which then feeds the further social withdrawal. Social isolation also increases your stress, increases stress and inflammation. And we kind of already talked about how that increases the wear and tear on your body from chronic stress. Excuse me for 1 second. Social isolation has been shown across the lifespan to affect memory and thinking. It's been linked to poor concentration, slower thinking, and greater cognitive decline. And also what's not on there is at an earlier age. So socialization is super important. Loneliness and depression reinforce each other. Feeling lonely makes you depressed. Feeling depressed increases your social withdrawal and then thusly increases your loneliness. It can also impact your sleep. And you see how you kind of can get into this terribly negative pattern of, I'm socially isolating, I'm getting more depressed, then I'm sleeping poorly, then I'm isolating more, so on and so on and so on. And it's depends on where in this, when a patient comes in with this kind of scenario, it becomes a situation of, where do I jump in and try and break the cycle? Do I try and break it with sleep? And then when they come back, do I talk to them about trying to get out of the house a little bit? It's different for everybody. Everybody's biology and everybody's situation is very unique. So I try to come up with something that is very specific for them, where I think that I could get the biggest gain out of the gate. And then we start to get into some of the details. So recommendations, and this is different for everybody. I personally really like the 1-1-1 rule, so that every week, this is kind of a busy slide for those of you that are in the room. I'm glad you have handouts. The 1-1-1 rule: attend one organized activity, initiate one conversation, and invite one person to do something. You could do all of these with the one person. So for instance, on Friday, I went with someone very important to me to a jazz bar and initiated a conversation with a complete stranger that was sitting next to us with a dog. I did an organized activity with around other folks, had a conversation with a complete stranger and with the person I was with, and kind of hit all of those in one evening. It's pretty simple. I'd like to think it's simple. I know it's not. There are a lot of low pressure options, exercising with others, learn something new. You can take a cooking class or a painting class. A year ago, they had there was a business in Mason that had a painting. What was the name of that business with the painting Taylor Swift stuff?
Oh, Eating with a twist.
Painting with a twist. Is it still there? Yeah, here in Mason, and they have theme nights where you do paint by numbers essentially. But it was a paint by numbers with Taylor Swift music and painting a Taylor Swift painting. You know, I didn't go, but people went and had a great time. You can volunteer. I'll be honest, volunteering is not honestly my gig, but there are a lot of people that get a real dopamine high from volunteering. And if that's the thing you enjoy doing, go do it. Take a cooking class with someone. If you've ever been to the Learning Kitchen, it's a little pricey, but it is a lot of fun to learn how to cook with a bunch of strangers in a funny way. And if your sushi looks unedible, you'll never see those people again. So it's kind of hilarious, but learn how to cook. It's with someone. It's a lot of fun. Rebuild existing connections. Periodically, someone you haven't talked to in 3 months or 3 years, reach out to them. Just all it takes is a text message. How are you doing? You want to get coffee sometime? Do you have time to get coffee? You know, let them know that you're thinking about them. I sometimes will tell patients do they have a default social contact, a group of a couple of people that they could check in once every 3 months with, that they've been friends with for a while, that can spur some ideas, for a golf outing or for just getting coffee or just going to catch a movie or something simple, going to Red Robin, whatever, going for a walk in the woods, something. There's some family-based options. This is kind of where faith-based opportunities with the volunteering or just being involved with if being involved with a religious organization or a faith-based community, they have some of the strongest community-based social events. And if that's your thing, I encourage you to get involved as much as you can. Try and reduce your screen time, spend more time with friends in real life. There is an app. Again, I'm telling people to get off their screens, but then get on your screens to find this thing. There is an app called meetup.com. You could literally have the weirdest idea of a good time and put that in and say, I live on the north side of Cincinnati or wherever you live, and it will give you a whole bunch of people with like-minded ideas of what a good time is that are in your area, and you can go do it. I've looked through it. It's pretty hilarious. I would encourage that. Pets are an important part of this, and this comes up when you read through the textbook and the research that's been done on positive connectivity. Pets are a big part of this. They provide companionship, emotional support, can reduce loneliness and isolation. And I've had someone try and take their cat for a walk. I don't think that ever goes well, but taking dogs for a walk it's healthy for your dog, but it also encourages a lot of social interaction. And if you're having trouble getting out of the house, there are some very specific cognitive behavioral therapies that can help people get started. To get them out of the house. Gradually increasing their social contact has been shown to improve mood and confidence. And along with movement and positive connectivity, this is a very important concept. Action precedes motivation more often than motivation precedes action. If you do it, you will be more likely to do it more. When it comes to movement, if I jump back for a second, when it comes to movement, I have had multiple patients tell me if I will start moving when I feel better. I will tell you that those folks are 100% successful at never moving. You have to move a little bit to start feeling better, which then will beget more movement. It's the same thing with getting out of the house and getting involved in some things. All right. Okay, so harmful substance reduction. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this on some of these slides because some of them are pretty self-explanatory and the evidence is really well known. I'm going to point out a couple of things that some folks don't know as related to as these things all connect. Alcohol significantly increases your risk of depression and anxiety. It may temporarily reduce your anxiety, but it often leads to worsening stress. Smoking and vaping can increase depression and anxiety. Adolescents are more vulnerable to this. The big problem with alcohol is that it actually worsens your sleep. You'll get to sleep, but you are going to sleep like ick. And that's really where it jumps back to my first couple of slides, where your sleep will be fragmented and broken up, and then people feel terrible the next day. So alcohol, particularly before bedtime, is not helpful. But then the flip side of this, and Zeke Emanuel talked about that in his Eat Your Ice Cream book, is if you're having a couple of drinks and doing what, mom and dad always said, don't drink and drive, like being smart about it, there's actually more benefit to the socialization part of that than there is the impact that it's going to have on your sleep for that night. The socialization is actually the more important part of this. Just be safe and don't be stupid about it with the alcohol. But the socialization part, if that's involved, is actually wildly more important than what the alcohol might do to you during your sleep for that one night. So again, there's caveats to all of this. Caffeine is often I don't think I've ever been to a primary care physician visit, not to speak badly of my family practice peers, where they've asked me about caffeine. Not once. Maybe I don't fit the bill of who they need to ask, but caffeine, if someone stumbled out of the mountains today and said, look, I found a bean, it's caffeine, and nobody knew what it was, it would be illegal under the age of 18, I have no doubt about it. Until lobbyists got involved, and then it would probably be illegal. Caffeine is a major, major problem. And it's depending on what culture we're coming from, it is more of a problem for some cultures than others because it's kind of ingrained in the culture. Small to moderate amounts are actually okay. The evidence supports that anything under 200 milligrams actually improves spotlight focus. It can be really, really helpful. It can narrow what you could focus on to everything in the room to just the thing that's right in front of you at small amounts. Higher amounts, once you start getting above 200 or 300, especially 400 milligrams, which is what the FDA recommends, you start getting into too much caffeine, you start looking at anxiety attacks, panic attacks, your risk of panic attack above 300 milligrams doubles. And then you start getting into sleep problems and increased irritability. What people don't realize about caffeine, and they drink it all day long, is that you will eventually fall asleep. But the problem is that caffeine stays in your system and is different for everybody. The quarter life of caffeine is 9 to 16 hours. Well, what does that mean, Brian? Is a great question. What it means is that if you drink 200 milligrams of a Red Bull at noon, you still have the equivalent of a cup of green tea in your system 16 hours later. So when a patient comes in and says, well, I went to the gym at 1 o'clock, yay, I'm exercising, and I had a Red Bull before I went, and then I didn't sleep really good that night, so everything you said doesn't make sense. I'm like, well, hold on a minute. You cannot, the caffeine has to be cut off like closer to 10 a.m. and because it stays in your system forever. And if people are having trouble getting to sleep or staying asleep or having a lot of anxiety problems, I get pretty hardcore with cutting the caffeine off. The recommendation from the FDA is 400, but usually with those kind of situations, it's a bit of math about, because everybody's sleep schedule and the time they have to be at work is a little different. So I use in a standard, I'm using air quotes, in a standard person that goes to work at 8, and gets home from work at 5, and goes to bed at 10 and gets up at 6, like that kind of scenario, I usually will tell them they need to cut it off at 10 o'clock. So 12 hours before your desired bedtime needs to be when you're cutting off your caffeine. Marijuana, cannabis, major problem, especially with this is not the cannabis that's out there right now is not the cannabis that was around when I was younger. It is highly addictive, problematic. What's the word? I'm like genetically modified, pure, problematic stuff. It's very potent. All right. I'm very sad to hear that just yesterday or the day before that the governor's line item veto that got the cannabis seltzers off the shelves somehow got overturned, and certain people are going to be able to put that back into back on the shelves. I had patients who had said, well, I stopped using cannabis and I'm drinking 12 of these THC seltzers. And when I did the math and how much was in it, I'm like, you're smoking 6 joints a night. The cannabis seltzers are a major problem, and I'm really disappointed that they are going to be back on the shelves, because it's people that with addiction issues will addiction hop. So if they stop alcohol, they move over to shopping, and then they stop shopping and they move over to gambling, then they move over to cannabis. And if they stop cannabis, then they're just jumping over to seltzers because it's socially acceptable. It's a real problem. Heavy cannabis use, the big thing that it does with sleep specifically is it fragments your dream sleep, which we need to live. You deprive a lab animal of REM sleep, it will die very quickly. REM reduction and fragmentation of your sleep is the real issue with cannabis. It is a short-term solution. You will fall asleep. You will have less anxiety. You will have less pain. But long-term, it is a total and utter disaster. And we're seeing it in the mental health community, in the mental health care community. It increases your risk, depending on family history, of psychosis by anywhere from 1 to 5 out of 10. And if you have a family history of bipolar symptoms, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to end up with a bipolar manic event where that requires hospitalization. I will tell you, and this is totally anecdotal, when I work inpatient, I just did it 2-3 weeks ago. Of the 32 beds in our hospital, I'm guessing, but it's probably around 20 of the 32 beds. The individuals are there because of cannabis-induced psychosis or cannabis-induced mania. It's a major problem, and you will never see that advertised in a dispensary. You're, really highly likely to end up in an inpatient environment from the stuff that we sell here. They're never going to tell you that. Adolescents are much higher risk because their brain is still developing. For girls, it's still about 24, 25. For boys, it's still age 30, and it increases the risk of future healthcare problems. I do have some patients who are in their 40s and 50s that use periodically, and that kind of goes down to what the last bullet point on here is: what is moderate use? There's been some talk in the government about releasing the testing for this because we don't know what moderate use is. We think it's twice a month. If I have someone who is 40 years old who takes an edible twice a month, I kind of don't care. I have bigger fish to fry. But if I have a 25-year-old who's doing it 4 or 5 nights a week, and then again when they get home from work and they're doing it to get there, that's a totally different conversation. We think that moderate use is twice a month, but we don't know that for sure. The research is really weak, as far as I understand. 30% of people that use cannabis will develop a problematic use disorder. The risk is much higher the earlier that someone starts using. Social media, this has become more of a problem recently, and I think it's interesting that some of the studies that have come out in recent years have pointed it directly that the number of mental health problems spiked significantly when the iPhone was invented and came out on the market. So whether that's cause and effect, I have no idea, but it certainly doesn't look good. The impact of social media and where the iPhone has what it has put in everybody's hand. Increases depression, anxiety, loneliness, self-esteem problems, problematic, the low self-esteem, unrealistic comparisons can increase stress and insecurity. That is an incredible problem with teenage females specifically. Passively scrolling at nighttime use can worsen symptoms. This is more where what you're doing is more the problem than the use. Social media can have benefits. If I have a patient who is an LGBTQ patient at a high school in Nowheresville, Ohio, or Indiana, quite honestly, they need social media to connect to like-minded individuals. It can be very supportive for them. Active balanced use is really what I try and focus on. Like, are you keeping it to less than 2 hours a day or less than 3 hours a day? Are you keeping it away from meals at bedtime and obviously when you're driving? And yeah, really try and get off of it before bedtime. I think that is the big thing. Is I try, if someone's not into reading, I'm like, are you into what's the word I'm looking for? Are you into graphic novels? A lot of folks are into comic books, and that can be a lifesaver because I'm like, oh, good. Let's run with that. Work stress. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, consider looking at the time that we have left here. Excessive work. It's not so much hours. Sometimes these are we live in a very difficult environment right now. Burnout is a serious mental health problem. It's a serious problem with mental health care providers. It leads to more sleep problems, and that's bidirectional as well. Emotional exhaustion and depression, it leads to increased medication use. And then this is where the work stress and the stress management goes back to then poor coping skill engagement, using alcohol when we get home and using marijuana when we get home, or retail therapy, or just door dashing food because we don't want to cook. We're exhausted. Financial stress, this comes in a lot of different forms. It impacts people in a lot of different ways. I think it's interesting that some of the studies that have come out that in cities where they've increased the minimum wage, the rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide have leveled off or decreased. Whether that's cause and effect, I don't know. But there's been some studies that show that just giving people more money to get through the day have been impactful. Hobbies and leisure activities. These have been shown in the research to protect mental health, lower depression rates, greater happiness, better life satisfaction. Some helpful activities I kind of threw on there. And they help build confidence and purpose and encourage social connection, create structure and routine, and they can reduce negative emotions. And then finally, purpose, meaning, and connection. Purpose and meaning have been shown, just if you just look at the research. Lower depression, lower anxiety, less stress. The important thing that I kind of like to think about this is that the research has supported this thing that people I think have kind of known. Purpose gets you out of bed. It motivates you, gives you something to do. But your relationships that are meaningful it's actually what gives those motivating things that you're doing. It's what gives them meaning. If you've ever heard of Viktor Frankl, he's a neuroscientist. I kind of love some of his quotes. He had a really interesting way of looking at things. So depending on what thing you look at through the years. Like Freud said that our goal was to seek pleasure, and Adler said our goal is to seek power. And another, I think he was a therapist by trade, Letham, and the people that he trained, has said that we are motivated by avoiding things that are negative. Viktor Frankl said, you actually are trying to find purpose. That's the reason why we get out of bed every day. That's the reason we go through life, is to find purpose in the things. And this is actually part of acceptance and commitment therapy. Which is a very specific kind of therapy that says, what kind of person do you want to be and what steps do you need to take to get there? We have to have purpose and meaning in our lives. And it is much more enjoyable if we have some kind of social connection to get through that with. So in closing, I don't expect anyone in this room or anybody that's online to take these slides and be like, I'm starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow. That's unrealistic. And I never expect any one of my patients. I try to be really selective, and I kind of try to introduce this stuff in pieces, because if I hit them with too much of it all at once, they'll check out and just be like, give me my refill. I'm kind of over all this. You have to do this. I have to do this very carefully, and anybody that tries to do this will introduce it slowly at the second or third visit, although I try to jump on sleep and caffeine, honestly, pretty quickly at the first visit, because I know that the medicine will work better if we jump on that fairly rapidly. I do not think that everybody can do all these things. I'm just being realistic, but everybody can do one of them. I really firmly believe that everybody can do one of the things. If I went all the way back to that first slide where I said, these are the things that people are coming in saying to me, if you fix one of those things, you can have a major impact. And then it spills into the next one, and it spills into the next one. I have seen this with patients. This is kind of a bold statement on my part. I don't know if there's any evidence. The evidence will say it's as effective as, that exercise is as effective as therapeutic interventions. I actually have seen it with patients where when they make these changes, I'll be honest, I've lived it personally as well. When you make some of these changes, after 9 to 12 months, I can get people to at least reduce their doses. And in some cases, I have had people say, I'm canceling my visits. I don't need it. So a handful of people, but people that have made so many changes in this, I've only been doing this for like 7 years now. People have made so many changes that they actually say, I don't need to see you anymore. I can actually reduce someone's medicine if they're willing to do the work to create these routines. The most powerful medicine is nothing that I prescribe. It's not a single thing that I prescribe for a lot of patients. It's the stuff that they do every day and that they repeat time and time and time again, which really gets them to wellness. And that's really the take-home message that I have for everybody today. There's references. It's in your slides. There's mountains of them. I probably have enough references here to write a daggone book. But that is I want you to understand, there's been some issues that some of these ideas of functional medicine and integrative medicine and lifestyle medicine as well, it's not backed by science. I would argue against that. That is not supported by the evidence. And with that, I would love to answer any questions or field any comments or anything that anybody has. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm very passionate about this, and I appreciate you guys coming out tonight or joining us online.